Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast, This Week in America. In the highly praised science fiction fantasy thriller Codename Zeus, a geopolitical saga by Gary Andersen, government agencies and sinister organizations in the United States and around the world closely follow the activities in and around the small town of Kursk, Texas. The town and surrounding area, settled by German-Russian immigrants in the early 20th century, suffered greatly from the dual impact of the Dust Bowl years and the Great Depression, only to be saved by two strange newcomers from Europe who are great believers in capitalism and the American way of life. They ranch, drill for oil, create a secret project codenamed Zeus, where they prepare for a major worldwide disaster, and along with a small group of outcasts, provide the path to survival. Gary Andersen was raised on farms. His parents rented near small towns in Minnesota, graduated from high school, one of 8 boys in a class of 15. He received a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering during the day, and at night a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of Minnesota. Over 5 decades, he went from designing computer logic and memory systems to sales and marketing positions with several companies, including Intel. He and his family moved to the Bay Area in 1975 and to Texas for an expected 2 years in 1986 and 1979 rather, and he remained there. In 1986, he became the 6th CEO of a small, never profitable, 7-year-old high-tech venture capitalist-backed company. He dramatically grew the company and made it profitable. He managed the company's successful IPO in 1994 and then left on his 10th anniversary as CEO. And Gary Andersen, author of Codename Zeus, a geopolitical saga, our guest on This Week in America. Hi, Gary. Welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Great talking to you, Rick.
Looking forward to this. What a fantastic background, first of all. You didn't waste any time at the University of Minnesota, did you? You were there, and you took full advantage of that, getting the degrees that I talk about. And the focus, we can talk about so many things. We're going to focus on this book. It's receiving excellent reviews. Codename Zeus, a geopolitical saga. What inspired you to write Codename Zeus?
I think my upbringing, my having never traveled anywhere, and my Danish grandfather, who I knew very well, and the ability to travel to 40 countries around the world and almost every state in the United States. I've always been, I read the dystopian novels like On the Beach and Level 7 back in the late 50s and early 60s, and they all end in disaster, and I wanted to write a story where some people survived and life on Earth could be regenerated.
That's such an interesting concept. The sort of the motivation behind Gary's book, Codename Zeus, a geopolitical saga, published by Stratton Press. Their website, stratton-press.com. The book in the bookstore, the book at the usual places as well. Was there an individual that got you started writing a novel? You've done technical writing before, but the first time you've done something like this, any inspiration in writing a novel?
Yes, in 1967, I got to know a man by the name of I can't think of it right now.
Robert Pirsig, I believe.
Robert Pirsig, yes. And Robert Pirsig had been a college professor, had some major issues, and was not able to get a job in college, and he decided to be a tech writer. And I happened to be his first customer. Did a wonderful job, and I was so fascinated with his methodology. I always remembered, I said, someday I'm going to write a book the way he did it. And it was so well organized. And then 7 years later, I saw in the Minneapolis paper that he was having his first day signing for Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It took him 129 tries before he got it published, but it sold over 5 million copies before he died several years ago.
That's an amazing story and gave you the inspiration for writing your first book of fiction, Codename Zeus, a geopolitical saga. Let's talk about the location. Why was West Texas chosen for the site for Newland?
Actually, I had the idea for the book almost 20 years ago. And the problem is I needed some place that was remote, yet accessible. And I've traveled all over, and I thought about doing things in Alaska, Canada, Eastern California. But one trip driving across California, I thought, my gosh, here we are in West Texas, a heck of a drive to Dallas, but only a 60 to 90 minute flight. So it fit both criteria, easy to get to and hard to get to, depending on the methodology.
You know, that's interesting. You had the concept for the book, and it took the years to find the right location, and you were able to come up with that. The book is Codename Zeus. Gary Andersen is the author. The book available through stratton-press.com, the bookstore, the usual places as well. If you're Googling Gary Andersen, Andersen is Andersen. Once you get everything in place to start writing the book, you've got the characters that you develop so well to tell the story. Why the foreign natives as key characters in the book?
Well, I've had so much interaction with immigrants over my lifetime, a lot in my own family and a lot of engineering people and management people I worked with over the years, namely someone like Dr. I'm having another blank. The head of the number 3 guy at Intel. He had made the escape from Hungary and ended up getting a PhD and being the number 3 employee at Intel, a company I joined much later. I had a rather interesting early experience with Intel in that I was there with my boss from Minneapolis during a trade show and went to visit Bob Noyce, one of the 2 founders, during that weekend, and I contracted the Hong Kong flu and passed out in Bob's office. So I always had a certain connection with Intel over the years.
You know, that's so fascinating. We do a whole show talking about the early days of Intel. We take it now as just a company we know, and we thank them because they're there to help us online and everything we need. And you were there during the years this was put together. Gary Andersen, our guest on the program, talking about his book Codename Zeus, a Geo-political Saga, receiving excellent reviews. That's why you chose the foreign natives as characters. How about that, the inspiration for the characters? What were you trying to bring out in the characters, the lead characters in your story?
Well, it's something that I see a lot of in Texas now. I every so often I'll run into an immigrant. And on my street, I have a Chinese fellow, very nice man. He's in his 70s. When he was 5 years old, he saw his father shot in the head by the Chinese. I have a couple that are from Serbia. We have a couple of black families on our street. And yet, being in Texas, probably every house in this street's got a gun in it. So it's a very diverse area, a very exciting place to be.
The book, Codename Zeus, you'll find it wherever books are sold. I'll send you to stratton-press.com. You'll find it there in the bookstore by Gary Andersen. Talk about the basis for the story. What the underlying theme of Codename Zeus?
What I wanted to do, I had several objectives. One was to sort of over the years show how technology and society and government intertwined. For example, I talk about some of the space projects, and I was involved in space from a couple different aspects. I provided a memory system for an early computer that NASA got a track satellite with. I built the original prototype for a satellite that wasn't launched until 12 years later. I was long gone by that time. So that's one thing. The other thing is I like the interaction of people. I like people with different personalities and see how they work together and don't work together. And having been a CEO of a small company for 10 years, I found that you really had to get people together. You couldn't manage by saying, well, we'll take care of your problem over here and we'll take care of your problem over there. I found that one of the problems that my predecessors had, they had to treat it like a big company and put everybody in a box. I believe that creativity comes from people coming together almost serendipitously. It's just a strange occurrence. So that's kind of it. And then I just like the history of the U.S. from the 1890s, when my grandfather first immigrated to the United States until the 90s.
You know, it's interesting as we talk. It's a lot of background for Codename Zeus. came from places what you visited, I think, people you knew, sort of a compilation of that. Is that pretty much it, that these are sort of vivid memories that you've had in your mind for years?
Oh, yeah. They're like the primary characters from Russia, same from St. Petersburg. Now, I've been in Moscow, but I've known a number of Russian people over the years, particularly those who became immigrants. It's that immigrant thing that seems to excite me, to watch how these people do things. For example, in my little town here, it's not a little town, but it's got its old original downtown, we have a number of Albanian-owned restaurants. And how they ended up 6 restaurants within maybe a 10-mile radius.
Wow.
How did they get here and become successful? And that's kind of what got me through the whole book. And so the Robert Barzinsky, the Russian, came because he was treated very poorly as a child. And the Jack...
Barnett?
Came because he just felt that his mother was being treated poorly in that, and he left when he was 18. They end up in Texas. Well, Barzinsky originally goes to New Orleans and becomes successful, and some oil drillers ask him to come to the Beaumont area and settle and provide his food services, in which he did, and ended up being an owner of a fairly successful oil well. Jack Barton was an employee of this company, and he noticed that he was very bright and had a lot of ambition, and they became partners. And they decided in the 1930s that the world was going to continue to have problems, that somebody should be prepared someplace in the world to survive so that civilization can continue if there's a major disaster. And I play it out with the idea that the various countries finally do get into a nuclear war, and worse than that almost, are using EMP, electromagnetic pulses, to destroy all the semiconductors in your cars, in your homes, it literally making society, totally collapsing society.
Yes.
And so I felt it was necessary to have a small group of people in a place that would survive that kind of environment. And that's what we did when we built a place called Newland. Now, the name Zeus came from the fact that Robert Barzinsky, that was one of his idols. And they just felt that was appropriate to name the project after Zeus, because of Zeus's play and his where he fit in the world. And so they worked there for many years, and then the disaster comes, and they are well prepared. They have a rather funny character that comes out of MIT who ends up getting kicked out of MIT and just happens to be in this little town in Texas, and becoming a part of the project. So, and then there's a rather interesting woman who leaves New York and meets one of the characters, and they fall in love. Very strange relationship.
And you can tell this is there's nothing else like it, is there, Gary? I mean, you've taken this sort of unique approach. He's giving us some background on the story there. The book, if you're just joining us, is Codename Zeus, a Geo-political Saga. The book is available, stratton-press.com in the bookstore. Of course, all the usual places, information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Another big part of your interest, another big interest for you is family history. And there's a tie to that, as I understand, as well in Codename Zeus.
Yes. One of my characters is named Dane Madsen. My grandfather from Denmark was named Hans Christian Andersen, born on the same island as the author. But when his father died, and after he had to go live with his stepfather and mother, they changed his name to Madsen. And he was a Dane, and Madsen, so that's where that came from. And he came from a part of Denmark I'm very familiar with. The Bartons come from a part of Ireland that I know. The only thing I don't know is I don't know much about St. Petersburg. But my characters are very important to me. Rick, who's the crazy young guy engineer that's into everything, he reminds me of two friends of mine. I think I made note somewhere that virtually everybody is a composite of one or more people, except for one person and I won't name who that is. But I actually asked this person for their permission to use their persona in the book.
That's fascinating how this whole story developed by Gary Andersen, codename Zeus. Time is going by so rapidly. The book is an excellent read. I keep wanting to say geopolitical thriller because it really is. It's so well written. You mentioned a lot about U.S. and world politics. Talk a little bit about why that approach.
Well, having traveled a lot of countries and having been in 3 different parts of China, having been in Russia, I was in East Berlin for a couple hours when the wall, 1 year and 1 month, 1 year and 1 week after the wall went up. And I watched the interaction, that particularly the people that came out of these kind of environments, and how it was just like they had popped into fresh air, like somebody coming out from a deep dive, and they see the world in a much different view than even the people around them. And I'm just fascinated, particularly with technical people, because a lot of technical people are not very communicative. So you have to kind of dig into them to know them.
Yes.
They're just a different personality than, say, a doctor or a lawyer or something. They're very introverted, many of them.
It's interesting how the whole background and your interest in U.S. and world politics come to play in Gary's book, Codename Zeus. What's your objective for the book? What were you hoping to prove to yourself in your first novel and to the reader? What do you hope the takeaway is?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I have 2 engineering friends. One's a civil, and one's another electrical. I talked to the electrical engineer this morning, and I told them I've written technical articles. I have a patent. I actually helped write an IPO prospectus, and I just wanted to try fiction. So I wrote 2 little short stories about Kursk, Texas, and they said, "Well, aren't you going to do more?" And being somewhat of an insomniac, 2 years later, I ended up with a book.
That's interesting, the writing style for so many people. You found quiet in the night? Was that why this was a great time for you to write?
Absolutely.
And when people read the book and they're like, this guy tells a really good story, I'm going to keep watching to see when his next book is out and see if the story continues. Are you working on a sequel?
Well, I have a couple of ideas. I'm also interested in politics, but I would do a sequel. If this book makes it, then I have several ideas on sequel. A sequel is going to be very difficult. The world. I'm almost 85 years old, and I'm not afraid to start. I don't know if I'll finish it, but I would like to write a sequel. I also I've looked at the American government from the viewpoint of the 300 and some cabinet members, maybe it's more than that, over the 245 years of the country. I'm just interested in the way different people from different backgrounds interact. And I have a couple other ideas. I might write some short stories. Right now, I've just got a lot on my mind and trying to get this published.
Well, there's so many fascinating thoughts going through your mind that sound like they would be fascinating books. Is there anything, a final question here as we wrap up, is there anything we can take from the book that we should be concerned about? Bugs, viruses, for example, natural and the developed kind. Viruses becoming a major weapon of war, some people believe. Are there messages in your book, things we should be aware of?
Oh, yes. That's a good point. I think the world is never going to be totally at peace. I've traveled enough and seen enough.
Yeah.
But with respect to viruses, I have been writing a weekly report for the last 85 weeks on COVID-19, consisting of now it's about 70 pages of tables and graphs and a couple pages of. I'm just fascinated on the way that pandemic spread. My analogy for a pandemic is the map of Houston. When it gets hit by a hurricane, every place gets flooded eventually. Some places get flooded twice. Some places get flooded much worse than others. And that's, if you follow the path of the pandemic, that's exactly what's happening. It's a fascinating story to follow. I wish I knew some way to put it into words, but I've been tied up on that quite a bit. But if the book, if we get Codename Zeus out there, I do have a couple ideas for a sequel, and I even wrote a first chapter, so maybe I'll pursue it someday.
I hope that happens. Again, the reviews have been excellent. It is a thrilling read. You won't be able to put it down. I'll guarantee you'll be well into the night reading the next chapter in Gary's book because you don't want to go to bed and have this playing in your mind. You're going to be thinking about it anyway. You might as well stay up and read the next couple of chapters. The book is Codename Zeus, a Geo-political Saga. Gary Andersen is the author and our guest on the program. That's Andersen if you're Googling. Book is published by Stratton Press. Their website is stratton-press.com. You'll find it there in the bookstore, the usual places as well, and a link on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Gary, pleasure having you on the program. Congratulations on the success with the first novel. Hopefully there will be more, and we'll be able to talk about those as well. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Well, thank you very much, Rick.
It's been a pleasure. Codename Zeus, a Geo-political Saga. Gary Andersen, the author. Book available at stratton-press.com in the bookstore. Information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We're back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.